right, so we're looking at Miguel's image here. Your exposure is ISO 100, 50 millimeters, f5 at 1/125th of a second. So that 1/125th of a second doesn't really matter because you're using strobes, but that f5 does matter. And it matters also in how we're reading the scene. So I think it was the perfect aperture to use because we want to move back in the image and want to get a sense of where we are. So we know you're next to the bed, but as we look back, we can see the master bath, we can see all the things that you have to get ready. So we have a sense of where we are, and we have enough information that we get the feeling of the space, but we don't have so much information that we start spending too much time in the back of the image. So this was a really good aperture to use. The light that you're using, you said, was strobe, and we can see that in the glasses. And I think you're a little bit behind where the strobe is hitting, right? If we look at the top of the bed here, we can see that it's brighter here than it is on you. So just adjusting that so that you're the brightest point opposed to the front of the bed frame. And I know that's tricky to do in a self-portrait, but that's pretty key here. Maybe moving the light a little bit further away from you so it's not quite as harsh, and then make sure that it's pointing right at you. One other thing on the lighting is that we see it in the mirrors, and oh, I can tell you how frustrating it is to work with strobe when you have any mirrors around anywhere, because not only do you have the reflection of the light that's going to show up in your image, but you also, that light can be pretty powerful that's getting reflected off and create more light in places that you might not even expect it. So it's a real pain working with that. But here it seems like it's just a reflection. It's not really throwing light back in a way that becomes a distraction. So just photoshopping that out of the background so that there's not this bright place that our eye keeps going back to. But your overall expression here, I think, is so strong. Having you at the bottom of the bed, kind of curled up, not a place that you're going to sit if you're having the best day ever, right? So seeing you kind of curled up, leaning against the bed, and looking at the camera with sort of this in between of like hopelessness, of giving up, and almost like asking for help from the camera because of the direct eye contact, I think is really beautiful, and it's communicating an emotion that we haven't seen from you in other images of other people. So I think the communication of what's happening here is working quite well for you. This image that we're looking at is by Eva, and you're at ISO 250, 50 millimeters, f4.5 at 1/50th of a second. So all of those settings look good. Your lighting here is this nice, soft, open shade lighting that's coming from one side and hitting your face and hitting your shoulder, and it's wrapping around. But I think if this was a normal portrait, I would kind of encourage you to bring in a reflector or turn your face more towards the light, because this is really beautiful light and we want to see that come across your face. But in this instance, you're showing sadness. You're showing the struggle of mental health. You're wanting to expose this in the image. You're crying, or your eyes look like you have been crying in this image. So in that sense, having the light off to the side and your face in more darkness, and it's not in darkness, but you can see that the brightest point is on the side instead of in your eyes. There's no sparkle in your eyes. There's no catchlight in your eyes like we would normally look for. But that's used strategically here, and I think it's working well to further the communication of the sadness that you're feeling with, of the struggle of mental health that you're dealing with, and that so many people are dealing with as we're in this isolation time with the pandemic. And depending on where you are, there's probably other factors. Like right now here, we have all the wildfires, right? So there's always something that's compounding this issue. And you're in front of the garage door, it looks like, which is a really plain, boring background that probably would not work for a lot of images. But I think the straightforward aspect of this, that you're just in front of the garage and this is like you're in this close quarters of your home, I think helps to emphasize the meaning of your image. So really beautiful image, very emotional and captures us, and that eye contact that you have with the camera, I think, is working beautifully. And then this image is by Lauren, and similar as we're just going through all these emotions in these images. You're at ISO 100, 50 millimeters. All three of these were shot at 50 millimeters. f2.2, so a really shallow depth of field at 1/250th of a second. You're using artificial light to just illuminate part of your face. We just have kind of this stripe of light that comes down, not really getting this eye lit up, but exposing just this part of your face. And there's a hopelessness that is around you with the darkness. And then we have this light that you're kind of looking up to as though it's hopeful. That's, I don't know, grabs me emotionally. And then just as we saw in Eva's image, here with your image, you're also showing deep emotion as we have the tears rolling down your face. And these images don't feel forced. They don't feel like this is artificial. This feels, even though it's staged and we know the lighting is staged, it feels very genuine in the emotion that's coming across. So I think that's done really well. And the way that you're using light to further tell your narrative works well also. And again, just like we saw in the last image, you've simplified this image. We're not looking at this in regards to everything that's going on around you. You've pulled just yourself, just your emotion out here to make a really successful image. And then this is the last image we'll look at for these four, and this is Andre's image. You're at ISO 640, which actually shows a lot of digital noise in this image, more than I would expect with your camera. But as we look at any of the midtones, you can see there's a lot of digital noise happening here. You're at 24 millimeters, so a little wider angle, f2.8 at 1/60th of a second, so that's all working well. You have the window light creating this beautiful light coming across your face, and then the other side of your face is pretty dark. It's in that shadow. So for this, if we were just photographing this as like an editorial image, I would want you to bring in a reflector to show more detail on the right side of your face, or I guess the left side of your face, the right side of the image. But here is you're just kind of telling us about yourself with this image. That darkness adds a nice element. It starts to fill out the narrative a little bit more. So I think it actually works well here. But as we talked about with the digital noise, if we were to zoom in on your face, we're going to see that digital noise in your face. So that's really a distraction as we get in there, especially on skin tone. It can be such a distraction. The other thing about having a higher ISO, and normally I wouldn't even call this a higher ISO, but we're seeing the negative effects of it, is that you don't have that full dynamic range, right? So those shadow areas are getting blocked up probably sooner than they would if you had a lower ISO. So I would bring down your ISO. You could shoot this with a much slower shutter speed. Since it's you know to be still in the image, you could kind of exhale and then trigger the shutter. Now, as far as what's going on in the image, I think this idea of the pandemic, and I know you were here in this house with friends, but here just having the books surrounding you and having an empty chair next to you with like, as though it's waiting for someone, I think speaks volumes to this time. It's a very formal image, very resolved in the way that you've set this up with the lines and the way everything is perfectly placed here. But that empty chair, having the books around you, I know they like cleaned up kids' toys and you made this scene, but it really starts to create that story that we are looking for of what's going on right now. Just sitting in the chair, having this beautiful space around you, but enjoying it by yourself.